Hey everybody, this is David with Savvy Organics Farm. It is a cold, wet, dreary day here on the farm in North Texas, but the animals, chickens and all still have to be fed. So, as you know, we had a class here at our farm last week. Val Nolen from Mother Herb's Garden was here teaching about garden soil prep for great spring gardens in 4 easy steps. So today is part 2 of that video. So while I'm feeding the animals out here in the cold, you guys enjoy the video and stay warm.
To the owner. And so we did. In that pot we watered less than any other pot. And we were totally shocked that it worked as well as it did. So for water retention, yeah. And if moisture is present, your soil is going to be happier. It's going to be more, the life's going to be maintained in it. The other thing it does, because there's a lot of it in there, when you mix it in and you pick up a handful of your mix of your garden soil and you look at it, a quarter of what you see, a quarter to a fifth of what you see should be shale. That's kind of how you know you did it right. If you only see a few dots, no, you're not doing it. You're not going to see any benefit from it. So you got to use enough. It's the only product of everything I'm going to suggest today, including compost, including mulch, which dissipates. Compost leaches away, eventually loses its nutrient value.
Stays there.
This stays. It does not leach away, it suspends itself in the soil, and it stays present for up to 25 years. So you only have to add it once, and then down the road you might have to add some more. I find that over time, people have said this a lot to me, well, it went all the way to the top. And I'm like, no, it didn't go to the top, the soil went down. So there's 2 years, 3 years into it, you'll find yourself mixing it back up pretty good again, because that's what's happened. But I highly recommend this stuff for containers as well as gardens. And again, because it holds the moisture, it does encourage things. DE, which is this powder stuff right here, this is not the chlorinated kind you put in a pool. So don't do that. This is food grade DE. A lot of people that have animals feed it to their animals. Peter and I eat it. A tablespoon on the granola once in a while. It is actually, it looks like nice sifted flour, but what it really is the skeletal remains of freshwater diatoms, which are like plankton. It's very, very fine. And when it's ingested, whether it be by your livestock or yourself, it doesn't kill parasites, but it makes it's like little shards of glass. It doesn't hurt you at all because it's so tiny, but it actually helps prevent them from being able to attach to your intestinal tract. That's why people use it on a lot of their livestock. I had a dermatologist somewhere in Cedar Hill that was referring people to use this for their complexion. And I didn't know that right away. And I had about 15 people in a 2-day period coming going, do you have food grade DE? And I'm like, wow, someone must have wrote an article or something, you know? So finally, at about the 15th one, I actually asked her, I said, so what are you going to use it on? She goes, oh, my dermatologist recommended it.
My face.
For my face. Yeah. And I said, cool, you know. And over time, they kept coming back and getting more. And I'm telling you, their faces looked pretty good. So, yeah.
What did you say? It's the skeletal remains of?
Freshwater diatoms, which are like plankton. But anyway, this is also silica. A lot of things love silica. But one of the things that it does that I think is a great ability for your plants, and it usually does take a little while for this to start to happen. A couple of years building into your soil, it seems. It's one of those unusual ones. Usually when you put something in, usually it's accessible right away. This is a little different. I don't know whether it takes that long for it to bind with soil. And I haven't quite found the answer. It's one of the ones I'm looking for. But eventually, after a couple of years of doing it as an amendment, when you amend your soil, it starts to be brought up into the plants, more accessible to the plants, the crops you plant there. Bugs hate eating silica, so a lot of times they won't.
I put it along the edge of the inside of the garage. Just pile
Yeah, well, they
trail
use it a
of it.
lot because bugs don't like walking on it because it's like little shards of glass, those diatoms. So as long as it's dry, that's effective. But when it's wet, like once it makes it into your soil, it starts to do a whole different thing. A lot of organics serve a lot of different purposes depending on how they're used. And this is one of those things. But it's a cheap, easy thing to do, and it's great for your soil. And you know, you can put some on your cereal. Try it out. It doesn't really taste like anything either. I tried it with spoon and water, don't do that. That's like eating wet chalk. But just on something else, you don't even know it's there.
I heard of putting a teaspoon in a whole glass of water.
No, to me it just tasted like wet chalk. I was like, no, I need to add something else. Okay, so we've done encouragement. We've introduced things, now we've encouraged them to grow. Now we're going to protect them. Mulch. And I say this, I literally, after the minute I have finished amending a garden bed, I put mulch all over. People say, well, I haven't planted anything. It is so much easier to go out there and move it back, make a little hole, pop it in, and put it back, than it is to try to go around all those little plants. And who's to say when you're going to get out there to do those little plants or those seeds? So protect what you've done, that investment you've made, and when you are ready to do whatever you need to do, it's prepared. You get to have fun after that. So I say, get all the work done so you can have fun. Well, I guess it depends on, some people like digging more than they like growing things. Now, as far as maintaining the soil health, that's the trick. That's where if you abandon a plot, or you get tired or hot or whatever the case may be. I get a lot of unfortunate church gardens and school gardens. All these people come to me for advice, and I really dig on them in the fact, I'm like, who's going to do it when it's hot? Do you have people that will commit when it's hot? Because otherwise you're wasting all your money and all these funds that you've raised, is someone going to be there? Because that's usually where it all goes wrong. So that's usually where it goes wrong for most home gardeners too. It gets to be too much. So, but the maintenance, if you have it covered and you at least keep it moist once in a while, if you have a heavy layer of mulch on and you get it good and wet, it will stay wet or damp for a very long time. So it's not like you got to keep watering and watering and watering, but God gave us 4 tools. People say all the time, how much should I water? Stick your finger in it. Is it wet? Good. As long as it's wet down there, not just on the surface. But I use my fingers all the time, and I teach people to too. Don't ask the question, just go feel it. Feel what it feels like. You'll know. But for maintenance purposes, I do use organic fertilizers. And like I said, ones that are applicable to whatever it is I'm growing. Some things need more fertilizer than other things. So, and some, like I said, tomatoes are different than cucumbers. If you give them the same food, you'll have very different results. Some will be happy and some won't. So, being more specific is better. You can top dress with compost in between. Like say, we got our winter crops in, some of us now. And then when they're done and we're thinking about spring, I have so much mulch on my beds that I rake it off onto a tarp or buckets. And then I'll add an inch or 2 fresh compost. And I got my mulch. It's not as much as I started with, but I can reuse that, and I can just add a little more. So that's another way to kind of recycle and as well as save some money. But that's one way to maintain your garden, to reintroducing some of that compost between growing seasons. Replenishing the minerals and the nutrients, which is like all of this kind of stuff, which I'm going to go over each of those. Reapply mulch if necessary. You got some left over you're going to put back on, you're going to have to add some more. And then avoid watering deeply and less often, just to maintain it. You're not trying to grow stuff. If you're going to let it sit out there in the heat, you got to do something for it. And then I did throw in here, avoid chemicals and herbicides. I say that to everybody, and I say it all the time. Because all of this work that you did and all of these things that you're going to do will be for naught if you do. So, they'll destroy what you've done. But happy soil equals happy plants. So what is soil? I've already mentioned that 50% of it is air. It's also water, mineral particles, coming from rocks, sand, clay, silt, organic matter, decomposing stuff like the forest floor, or anything where stuff is old and it's decomposing. You've got wood, whatever it is, and then living organisms. Forest floor, anywhere you got that kind of decomposition going on, it's going on, but with the help of them. So they're going to be present. And there are many different soil types. Like I mentioned, there's 8 in Texas. Most of us just have this prairie soil here. Some of us might be lucky enough to have some black prairie. I think David has a little of it here. I have a little strip of it. It's the most unusual soil type in Texas for the way that it works. Usually soil types are blobs of space, The black prairie is this like lightning bolt. It's very thin and very long. And it stretches from like the Red River down into Texas. So there's little if you're in that line or in that jag, you might have some. But it's still pretty heavy, You still got to deal with the fact that it's heavy clay. And they differ in lots of ways: color, texture, structure, mineral content. That white rock, do a lot of you have that white rock? That's actually the ocean floor, compressed over millions of years. And if you dig at it right, I've found some pretty good fossils in mine, which I think is so cool. It's like I always wanted to be an archaeologist. I can do it in my backyard. But that's a lot of calcium. People don't think we have calcium in our soil. We do. We got a lot of it. It's not always accessible to plants, but it's there. Also, too, I'm going to just throw this in here now. It's kind of out of line of things. That white rock, it needs to stay down there. It doesn't do anything up here. And I say this because people go tiller crazy. They just, rocks flying everywhere. Most of us have a very shallow topsoil. It took millions of years to make that 3 inches. Protect it with your life, because that is all you got. So, if that's what you got to start with, that's it. Don't go digging down in there. If you need to build it up and add more on top, that's okay. But all the life and things that function down there at the deep and within the rock, they're doing purpose. They have a purpose. They have a life down there. They will not survive or function above. All of this soil life that's in this very valuable topsoil that we have, it cannot function, survive, or do its job if it gets turned down underneath there. So if you're going to use a tiller to start a bed, when you hit the rock, don't go any deeper than that. Stop. And for new beds even, because if that would be where I would use a tiller, if I got 3 inches of topsoil, I'm going to add 3 inches of compost. So I'm going to have a 50-50 mix. And then I'd probably add a couple inches of shale. So I'm adding like 5 inches, and then a couple inches of, mulch. So people ask me all the time, should I make raised beds? I'm like, by the time you put everything on you need to, they will be raised whether you like it or not. So, cinder blocks work, scrap wood, stay away from railroad ties, they're full of arsenic. But there's a lot of things you can easily make beds. You don't have to go crazy. I use a method where I put in flashing. I dig it down really deep and I go all the way around, then I just face it with anything I want. And those will last forever. I will never have to dig those beds again.
Why do you use flashing?
I did a design years ago for the big old villa garden I did. And he had a couple of acres of lowland, which was beautiful soil, but it was covered in Johnson grass. Covered. And I went, oh my gosh, how am I going to get rid of this? So instead of trying to eradicate the Johnson grass, which is a futile thing to try to do, I decided Johnson grass will go down about 18 inches. So what I did was I dug down 18 inches and I created these trenches. And I got 24, 28 inch flashing, and I lined it, dropped it down into the trench. And then I hired a bunch of the tree guys that a friend of mine has a tree crew. And I said, okay, dig it all out. Here, I was paying by the hour, But I also gave him a bucket, and I said, every time you fill that bucket with all those tiny pieces, because all it takes is one tiny piece, I'll give you $50. That's a bonus. And they did. And to this day, there is no Johnson grass in a 3/4 acre garden.
Wow.
Because of the way I built those beds. And in my house, I have Bermuda. I don't have Johnson grass. And I thought, And I would rather take a lot of time and really do something that's going to last forever so that I don't have to redo it. I'm not going anywhere. That's the other thing. It's an investment and it takes time and effort. But it's amazing. You just get that flashing from Home Depot and the big rolls. And the beds are amazing. You'll never have to do them again, and nothing goes under and comes up. As long as you got a mulch, you're not going to have any weeds in there at all. I don't have any trouble at all. The only one that gets to me once in a while is little hackberries. Because I got a lot of hackberry trees. And they'll work their way down through the soil. So. But, all right. I went way off, and I'm coming to drag back over here. Soil is alive, at least healthy soil. And there I go again. Chemicals and synthetics can deplete your soil and cause destruction to your beneficial microorganisms, the good bacteria and fungus, and your earthworms. And of course, so does the act of over-tilling. So, 2 things to stay away from. The NPK, that's when, some of you probably know what that is. When you look at a fertilizer bag, well, at least the alfalfa has one on it. You'll see 3 numbers often enough. That's NPK. That's nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium. Or potash. Some people call it potash. If you're looking for organic, by the way, if you see any number on this bag that's higher than a 9, it's not organic. So that's a dead giveaway. Because they're using all kinds of tricks now. Organic traditions. 15, 30, 15. What? So, look at the numbers. I always tell people to do this anyway. People think first of all, low numbers don't push things. You use a 15, 30, 15, and it's 95 degrees out, and you just fried your whole yard. And they're not going to tell you that at Home Depot, by the way. But if you're using organics do not push things. They create health and balance. They give your soil and the plants the right to actually, they're both just like us. The soil is a living organism just like we are. It has stress levels. It has an immune system. All of these things exist in soil. All of them actually also exist in plants. So if you're keeping the health of everything up by using organics on a regular basis, it is in the best place it can possibly be, and it's easier because you're not fighting with it so much. But it does take a little bit of time and timing. A lot of organics is about timing. That's why I always do this class first thing in the year, because now's the perfect time to get all this stuff going, if you haven't already. But you can get a simple little soil test kit. Some people send off and have their soil analyzed. I've seen some of the reports. Some of them look like Chinese. And I don't know how much some homeowners get out of them, but you can also just get the little simple ones and make sure you use distilled water. It won't work if you don't use distilled water, because all water has trace minerals and trace metals in it. Distilled water has had those removed. So it will affect your test if you don't use distilled water. But you can get those little tests and you can test your soil if you just follow the instructions. And then you go, okay, I know where I am. But there's 4 parts to those tests. And these 4 parts are important to look at specifically. The first one is about your pH levels. Does anyone here not understand pH? Wow, okay. There's a pH to your body, there's a pH to soil. If you have a pool, you got to do that little test, pH test, before you add chemicals, because if you just throw the chemicals in there, they're not necessarily going to work. If the pH is too high or too low, what it does is it locks it up. It locks your body up. So you're eating all this great organic food, but your body's not accessing it because your pH is too off. Your pool's off, so the chemicals don't do anything. Your soil's off, so all that good stuff you're putting on your soil is not being able to be accessed by your plants. So people say, well, how do I get my pH right? You get your pH right by looking at the other three, the P and the K. You look at those individually. And if you can balance those, then your pH will change. It doesn't happen overnight. But some people say, oh, you know, it's real alkaline, I'll just throw some acid in it. No, don't do that. You have to do it biologically. Nitrogen, most of us are lacking it. But each of the three do specific things. Nitrogen is responsible for the dark green color in plants. Like a lot of us have that yellowing that happens. They call that chlorosis. And often enough, sometimes it's iron deficiency, but it's often misdiagnosed as iron deficiency. Usually, it's the nitrogen. So you can change that. Without green leaves, plants can't do the photosynthesis process. The darker they are, the more they can pull from the sun. The more faded or yellow they are, pale, the less they can do that. And that's a big part of the way that they're feeding themselves. And the sun itself.
So if the leaves are yellow, they might need more nitrogen.
Right.
So other than a fertilizer, how would I put nitrogen?
Well, you don't have to put high in nitrogen. You just have to, one, look at the numbers on a bag, or when we get to the next page, I'll go over it.
Okay.
Alfalfa builds nitrogen.
Okay.
Legumes. So you can actually put a little bit of that. And most good fertilizers, organic ones, that's one of the things they're going to have in it, is alfalfa. Okay. And the first number is the alfalfa number. So you can look at that and say, oh, okay, I want something that's a little high in that number. So, you know, often if you look at flowers and stuff, the first two numbers are going to be a little on the high side. The second one is the phosphorus. Phosphorus has to do with everything that moves outward. That's your root system development, that's your branching and flowering and all that going on. So the phosphorus is also something, when you do a test here, you're going to find that you probably don't have anything, if not just a trace. Phosphorus, if you go to, sulfur rock phosphate's the answer there, but it's expensive. And if you do a whole garden bed in it, it's going to cost you some bucks. So I have come up with a plan. Oh, and I didn't put one in here. It looks like this. It's a mix that I make called Val's Mix. I got some out there on the table.
Val's Mix?
Some people in here have used that mix, right?
Oh, Val.
Yeah. Now, I call it that because it's made out of two things. Soft rock phosphate and earthworm castings. That's a lot of words. It's easier for me to say Val's Mix.
Yeah.
But it's a 50-50 mix of that. And instead of putting the phosphorus all over my garden, I put it directly under my plants or my seeds. You know, and my germination rate and rooting time for using this is phenomenal. Seeds are great; they love it. You can just sprinkle some where you're going to put your seeds, or your little trench, line your trench, or maybe you got a transplant in a tomato or cucumber or something. About a tablespoon underneath them. You know, the earthworm, again, you're getting some earthworm castings in there. If you didn't introduce some of those, you're going to do it now. And you got the phosphorus exactly where it needs to be. So you're not spending a ton of money trying to put it everywhere. The third thing is the potassium or the potash. And we're usually pretty good in that realm. But that's what regulates water and plants' ability to pull it up and utilize it. So each of these things is a single test you'll find in those kits. And you'll be able to go, wow, this one's too low, this one's too low. And that's when you go to my list of amendments and their purposes. So you got all of the information here that you could use to make choices. Now, there's more than one way to skin a cat. So as you're going through this, I've gone over compost, so you know about that one. I've gone over the shale and the uses of it. The alfalfa meal is nitrogen. So is cottonseed meal. Now, for a long time, I was very anti-cottonseed meal because, I think about cotton in Georgia and all the herbicides they use, and I wouldn't go near it. Well, I came to find out they're actually growing it in other parts of the country, and they don't have to use the herbicides, like in the high plains in New Mexico. And some of the mesas are doing it. So this actually, the one that you find more often than not, is that one. So I have changed my tune on cottonseed meal. Things always change, guaranteed. Staying on top of it's the hard part. But both of those work as a nitrogen fix. So you can, whatever you can get your hands on. Dry molasses, again, that's something that it's not one of the NPKs, but it does so much to activate your compost and your microbial activity. It also adds sugar content to your produce. I have a woman that grew cantaloupes, and she had a small market garden. And I conned her into trying it. She goes, oh my gosh, the cantaloupes are so sweet. She goes, I don't know why I never used this before. So it will change the sugar content too. So there's lots of good reasons to use dry molasses. The Texas green sand we haven't talked about. That is 20% iron, so it is iron. And in some soil types, in some areas we have a little, and in some places we have none. So it's a good way to help the green up too. And if you got a good fertilizer, it's going to have this in it as well. It says sand, and I'm very anti-sand, and they just say that because of its texture. It actually kind of feels like sand. It's dark green. It is mined in Texas. And it's got a ton of trace minerals in it, which is the big part as far as I'm concerned. Because when you're growing food, if it's not in your soil, it can't really be in your food. So that's where adding these things in so that you guarantee that what you're eating has got what you expect it to have in it. Soft rock phosphate, that's that middle number.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Texas green sand, do you need to stir it in with the soil?
No.
Good, you just put it on the top when you need
Pretty
it.
much, yeah. You can throw it on like you would a fertilizer.
Okay.
Almost everything on this list, almost. The compost and the shale do need to get mixed in. But all of these other amendments are water soluble. So you can often enough, and we'll get to that when we do the bed prep, you can pretty much put them on top. In a garden bed, I'll throw them all on top, and then I'll just sort of, I don't rake back and forth, but I sort of kind of woogie them a little, just to rough them to start to move in. Yeah, woogies. And then I get them wet, because that starts the leaching process. There are some other things out there, Minerals Plus, azomite, trace mineral supplement. The green sand really does a lot of it. I have used the Minerals Plus, and I just did another bed in it. I haven't done one in a couple of years. And I do that and humate together, and it is so good. I just have to remember to do it. Another way to skin a cat. The earthworm castings. Up to 50% organic matter, trace minerals, humus, and beneficial bacteria. Good for houseplants, easy way to fertilize your houseplants. And put a handful in the hole when planting along with soft rock phosphate. That's that Val's mix. Why I didn't call it there, that I don't know. It also aids in seed germination, like we said. And you'll notice that underneath each of these I've put like, for that one it's like 20 pounds per 1,000 square feet, or 2 to 4 pounds per 100 square feet. So you kind of get an idea how much you're going to be needing for a lot of these products. The DE, we've gone over. And one of the other things I do with DE, I keep a little tub of it handy. When I'm digging around in the garden, especially after this wet, if I have any ants, they're coming up. And I'll find them pretty fast. But in the heat of the summer, if I'm digging, they're not up like that. I don't see them. I'm going along, all of a sudden, wham, I've got fire ants all over me and my tools and everything. And it's like, oh, jeez, and I need to finish this. I go get that little tub, and I call it Betty Crocker in them. I just blast them with the DE. And the DE, because it's tiny shards of glass to them, it gets into their little exposed joints. Hard-bodied insects, not only, their skeletons on the outside, their exoskeleton. So when they get dusted with this stuff, they're not